I guess if the idea is that the mind can go to all of these far-flung places at different parts of time, one could assume that you could just look at a lotto ticket, but you're saying, hey, look, over decades of experience, this is a very tried and true protocol, and it doesn't do that.
It
Which is like,
doesn't.
what does it do then? That's fascinating. And so what it does is, well, mostly it's for you in a big way. And mostly it's for you to be able to take on an ownership that you are more magnificent than you realize, that you have an innate gift as a member of the species, and you have a divine right to be able to just tap into who you are and go and do amazing things in this world.
Know this already, the influence you have over your reality is far beyond what you've been told. Soon, you realize that your outer world is merely a mirror of your inner world, and we're here to connect the dots for you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Godmode. It's time to give a formal introduction because we're here in the presence of truly legendary as an instructor, and knowing one of the most sophisticated and important discoveries of the modern time. And so we have David Morehouse here with us today, and it's truly an honor. And I can't say that enough. Like even if we're just like not on podcast, I'd probably say this like a billion times. So very excited. I got to meet David back in 2000. I think it was 2018 towards the end of the year.
God,
and
it seems like last summer. It's hard, guys.
Right.
It's like, it's hard to believe that it was that long ago.
I might have seen this day coming.
Yeah,
thanks to your methodology.
You and your wife sitting right there, up in the
it was unbelievable.
Right front.
It was
a
life-changing.
Yeah,
truly life-changing experience.
Yeah.
And I want everyone to know this, that I don't just bring guests on. This is definitely one of my most respected, most not only friend but mentor and teacher who has taught me a great deal about what we're truly capable of. So this episode is for you, those of you who are wondering, what can I really do? What if there's more to me? What is my truest potential? And now we have science to be able to share with you that you can become much more, and you do have within you simply an ability that is far beyond what science fiction or any fantastical movies may show you. Oh, you can peek into a world beyond space and time. Well, let me tell you, it's true. Especially we have Dr. David Morehouse here with us today. He's going to share with us the why, the what, and the how, and how you can participate in this training. Because the greatest news ever is that Dr. David Morehouse is bringing his content and trainings to the upgrade platform so that we can upgrade humanity together. Because imagine for a moment that you are able to gather information about you, the most important person in your universe, you, right? Being able to gather that information about you and how you can become a better version of you, what you need to do, what you could be doing, becoming even more inspired and more accurate with that inspiration, and knowing how to become the best version of you to benefit all of humanity. And if we can all do that, more of us being able to do that, I think that this world will become a better place. So once again, welcome to the show, Dr. David Morehouse, and very wonderful to have you here. And Brady as well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. You're going to have to quit saying I'm legendary. People are going to expect that I'm able to appear and disappear, or something like
that. You practically do that already.
Well, realistically, if there's a repertoire, if there's a whole laundry list of different developed human skills, 72, as you said, then one of those has got to enable you to pop in and pop out. But I think, getting off on subjects, look, to establish this, we're speaking about something that is a very high level consideration. So for our viewers, our listeners, understand, like William said, that there are only success stories and there are only fascinating figures that come onto the Godmode podcast. And the reason that's important to understand is that for the next foreseeable couple dozen minutes, you are going to hear things that are going to challenge your belief system about your mind, your abilities. And the second you're okay with that challenge, the second you start evolving, because that's what happened with me. That's what happened with other participants in the trainings that we've attended with Dr. David Morehouse. And so I think just starting there and saying, hey, listen, open your mind, understand that you are more incredible than you think. And if you encounter resistance, so how could getting data without the five senses, how could that be possible? If that's your thought process, be okay with punching through it, because the rest of us have, and we're on to something very interesting, and it would serve you well to move through that quickly, because the human brain is beyond capable. And it's not clear exactly where that limit is, but intelligence agencies and intelligence apparatus have invested millions and millions and probably billions of dollars in investigating and pushing the limits, and then creating SOPs around how to push the human mind for strategic and military advances. So thank you for being here, Dr. David Morehouse. My question for you, let's start with this, is out of the 72, you said there's 72 bullets maybe of different skills that the mind can do, but they're not all rated even. They're not all 50 caliber rounds. Some of them are little 9mm rounds. Some of them are, well, that one's a little less developed. Remote viewing, though, seems to be the 155mm cannon approach, in that there is so much data. There are so many experts. The programs are likely still going today. This has been developed for decades. How does that compare to maybe other skills that have been developed over time? Is remote viewing really one of the most forefront, established, and well-researched methodologies of the human mind pushed?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It was the methodology of choice that finally came out of SRI International under their sole source contract back in circa 72, 73 from the CIA, where, there was a complex contract, but there were basically three deliverables. And, one was, can you prove scientifically beyond any reasonable doubt that there is a human ability to see distant in space-time and report on what is perceived there? And that was answered fairly quickly. And the next thing was, can you tell us who's capable of doing this? And that is where one of the most profound things, I think, came out of that entire sole source contract, which was relayed by Russell Targ, where he said, well, what we found is that everybody's capable of doing it. There's nothing unique about any one person. It's all about a belief structure. It's about, do you believe it's possible? If you don't believe it's possible, then don't waste your time. You will be an extreme minority of the human population, like it or not. If you turn around and say there's nothing past the physical, you die and turn back to dust again, and that's it. Okay, you're certainly entitled to that. I don't share that belief, and I have knowledge that takes me beyond that. Can I say I've been, into the afterlife? Absolutely not. I cannot. But do I know and do I understand what was meant by saying that we all have this ability? Yeah, as I've alluded to it many times. There's so much research now that's just bordering on absolutely fantastic to just being, research that, in an empirical way keeps edging us up to the boundary of what we have been, heretofore been willing to accept as reality. And it just keeps pushing that boundary and pushing it, right? And every time we think we're at a limit of what we can be or know or sense, we push through again with another bit of information, with more pieces of it, which is exactly how the science of, of human performance and human capability and human potential and promise and possibility should be looked at. It is like any other science. It's in a state of fluid motion. You can look at the physics that we use, the quantum mechanical interpretations and concepts. Key there is interpretations, because all the great physicists will tell you. The great physicists will tell you that everything we think we know in classical or even quantum mechanical physics could be wrong tomorrow. Why? Because the variables change. What we know changes, and what we know or think we know changes, and it changes the variables of the equations. So now the math proof no longer supports the theory. So therefore, we're back to the drawing board on the next thing. And that's the way humanity progresses. So we don't speak of these abilities in terms of absolutes, and we do not speak of the science to explain quantum mind and this kind of human performance in terms of absolutes. We explain it in terms of interpretations that we apply in practical exercise. And when we apply in practical exercise, we do not anecdotally decide, did we do this or didn't do this? We look at empirical data. We know what the quantifiable attributes will be for a target: 100, 200, 250, 300 quantifiable attributes. You get video feedback, written feedback, quantifiable attributes, right? And so your whole process in learning it is learning the structure and the protocol and understanding the scientific approach to it, and understanding how beautiful the structure is, in that it says, if this, then that; if that, then this. It's an extraordinarily powerful tool. And you get that, and then the whole thing of the beginning, which starts off as coordinate remote viewing, the whole intention in coordinate remote viewing is not to baffle you with the complexity of the program. It is to demonstrate to you that if you'll follow the protocol, the data that you will derive will be usable, highly correlated with other remote viewers that are working with you in the training. And while you may only be a 6% solution, quoting Stansfield Turner again, you're going to see other people that are a 66% solution, or a 24, or a 72, and yeah, right? Everybody, every day, every session, target to target, cycles in human performance as you do in anything in your life in terms of human performance. Nobody hits a plateau and stays there forever. We all go up, right, and we all go down. We have good days, we have better days, we have lesser days, we have really bad days. It all varies. But the idea here is to understand this is something that anyone can learn, as long as you're willing to accept exactly what all of the polls from Pew to CNN have come back and said about the number of individuals that believe that there is something beyond the physical. 98% of us believe there is something beyond the physical. Only 24% of us believe that that's something beyond the physical that we can actually interact with, learn, contribute to and learn from, etc. The rest, the 76%, say, I believe it's there, but I don't see a pathway that gets me to that place where I can feel confident in what's going on there. And belief is just not enough for me. And that's our whole point in this message with Upgrade and in remote viewing period. Is like, it's not about believing. You have to have a belief that it might be something beyond the physical for you. If you have that belief, we'll show you that there is. Empirically, we will show you that there is. That's when you will go from believing to knowing. And that is the most powerful thing that we can have you do. That transformation, to go from belief to knowing that something is part of your life. And that once you recognize that, it'll never not be part of your life again. You can never not have it as part of your life anyway. You're born with it, but it's just the legions of the status quo that tell you what you are not. And we hear so much about what we are not in life, as opposed to what we can be and what we are. The picture is constantly an ever narrowing scope of limitations for the vast majority of humanity. Look around if you doubt that. Just look at what happens and what drives certain people, and other people just have no drive on anything anymore because they've been beaten down and fed limitations for so long that they They don't know what could springboard them into new possibilities for themselves.
Right.
But this is the start of that. That's what this is.
That I think that's incredible to have you articulate it in such a data-driven way. Will, this is what really drove you to found Upgrade and bring people to an awareness of their own self-imposed limits. Any thoughts with regard to our self-imposed limits and why we do that, Will, and kind of what David Morehouse is saying here?
Yeah, I'd love to share my first experience with David. And I remember sitting in a room and David gave me 8 numbers. And I'm like, what am I doing with these 8 numbers? He's like, trust the process, right? And I do. I'm a very willing, coachable participant. If you really know me, I follow the steps. And what I did in the process was that also David took us into an altered state, which is very important. And utilizing those 8 numbers, which I had no idea what they weren't actual coordinates of anywhere, in terms of like geographical coordinates. They were just numbers. And following the process that David taught me, I started to draw this horseshoe shape. I'm like, this is weird. Why am I seeing horseshoes? And I start seeing water pouring from the edge of the horseshoes into the middle. I'm like, this is even stranger. Like, this has got to be made up. There's no way. And then I remember David told me, hey, instead of doubting, instead of all that, continue to stay relaxed in that altered state and continue to allow the data to flow in and trust, right? And so I'm like, I'm going to trust the process. I started to draw buildings around the horseshoes. I'm like, there are trees and there's cloud, there's wind. I'm like, this is weird. What is this, right? And I was extremely doubtful of what I was doing because I'm like, okay, I don't know if this is real. I'm just making this up or not. And one thing you guys will notice if you're watching, listening to this, you'll notice sometimes we get these inspirations in our lives and we have no idea if they're real or not. What David taught me at this instance was to relax and allow the data to flow. And then as he looked at my drawing, he's like, oh, you're actually drawing the target and you're spot on. And I'm like, what is the target? And so minutes later, he showed the whole class and it was Horseshoe Falls, Niagara Falls. And sorry, I hope you don't mind. I gave away one of the targets, but
No. Well, that's not one of them anymore. So usually,
okay,
usually I don't repeat them. That if I do repeat them, they're years apart. So there are plenty.
We've moved on, Will. So many cents.
Good.
Yeah, with the times.
I had a feeling. So that was mind blowing to me. As I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm a beginner, but I did have something to my advantage, which was the ability to relax my mind and clear my mind of noise from all of the years of developing Upgrade and removing my negative emotions and fear and worry and anxiety. I was able to just snap into that moment of pure stillness. And that made the process very easy and effortless. Now, I at that moment, I was like, man, I've got to work with David. I've got to bring what David's doing. And look, David's trained over what, 26 or 30 something thousand people around the world now?
Well over 26,000. We stopped counting many years ago just because it didn't serve any purpose. So, I mean, other than...
Hey, that's a lot of people that you've trained. And I would say
very blessed to have the opportunity to do that. Yeah, very blessed.
I don't know if you know this, David. I literally followed you for well over 5 years. And then I was like, finally, he announced a live training. I was one of the very first people who signed up in the world, as far as I know.
I used to creep you on Clubhouse. Anytime you'd pop up, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy that I've read a ton about, he's on Clubhouse. I got to hop into an audio room. I got to talk to you time at like 2 a.m. I was so excited about it. Yeah, if anyone can't tell, this is legit. We're huge supporters of this entire thing, so keep listening.
Yeah, you guys are amazing. I mean, I stopped teaching like around 2004 just because we were at war, we were at war in 2 different places, and there was just a need, to serve in some capacity. And I just sensed, and the whole direction of enhanced human performance potentials, that people were just no longer interested in that. I mean, from a spiritual perspective or just a human performance perspective, people were just, there was no interest in it. I mean, you had guys that had football careers that were hanging it up to go become a ranger like me, and you go serve in a ranger regiment. You had all of these places of just human potential and growth that were just drying up and basically blowing away. I mean, somewhere in the mid 90s, there were like, I tell this story all the time. It was like, there were like 3,600 places around the world that people would go to engage in spiritual practice. And I mean, people had, speaking tours that they would just, guys like Wayne Dyer and everyone, everywhere here, there. I mean, you couldn't get off the road. There were so many places for you to go. But by the time we got into, 2003, 2004, it was well under 300 rather, well under 300. Somewhere like, yeah. And it was getting worse. And I had good friends that put tens of millions of dollars into building, a facility like that, like Crossings in Austin, Texas, which is now just a shadow of itself. And the original founders and builders of the place just sold it and went away because they couldn't, what the business wasn't viable anymore. People were so derailed from those kinds of pursuits that it was kind of pointless at that point to continue to try to, flog that horse, if you pardon my expression there. So I just stopped. But in 2018, when you were there in class, and then just the relationship we had in talking in Vegas when I was living there, and, talking at other times, and then coming and speaking with the folks in Upgrade in Miami, all of those things just sort of started to rekindle, this idea, this spark, this interest to once again, begin teaching this, because I felt like, okay, war's over now. That now people are going to slowly start looking for these kinds of programs again. And there's also a tremendous group of people that Upgrade and what we're going to be doing in terms of remote viewing with Upgrade, et cetera, who could benefit from this. And that is our veterans, who at this point find ways to commit suicide at the rate of 21 to 23 a day. That's a lot. 21 to 23 a day take their lives.
Man.
Well, we pull kids off the streets and we put them, in a place to do the dirty work of the Republic. And we alter them forever with the sights and sounds and smells and emotions, the tastes of war. And then we bring them back and expect that they will somehow assimilate into society. And despite what Department of Defense might say and Department of Veterans Affairs, noble efforts made on all fronts, but they don't have the tools. They don't have the tools. They don't have the study. They don't have the background. They don't really know how to unravel that for people. That's another where I think that just, the virtual reality that you're doing and that kind of stuff has tremendous application, because one of the things we know from remote viewing is that the human mind works, faster than the universal constant of the speed of light, right? It cognates faster, according to Targ and Rauscher. And our concern here is that when a kid comes out of combat and where they've lost friends or something even happened to themselves, that they engage into something called conceptual illusion, right? So their mind is respinning and reliving that moment over and over again at an ever increasing speed. And because we've been structured with so many limiting thoughts and beliefs, that's what begins to swell the flow of this conceptual illusion, and it goes completely out of whack. And we've all experienced that in life. The idea with remote viewing and various forms of remote viewing, and even with a virtual reality application, would be able to take things like combat reports and other things and build a virtual reality resimulation of precisely what happened from everybody's perspective, because everybody's interviewed after a firefight. It's not just left to, yeah, that happened. Particularly if there are fatalities and injuries, wounds, those kinds of things, destruction of vehicles, enemy personnel, all of that stuff could be relived. And most of these people feel like they did something wrong. Why? Because you've been spoon-fed limiting thoughts for almost every day you've been alive. And it's very easy to start assuming and assembling memories that support this idea that you did something wrong. You didn't do your best in that moment. And that's why a friend got killed, or that's why, two friends got killed, or something else, right?
Man.
And that tends to be the biggest detractor that spins around in the heads of these individuals, men and women, young, that just decide that they aren't going to live another day, and they take their life. 21 to 23 a day, every day, 7 days a week, that happens.
Wow.
And when the war
One
ended,
is too many.
oh, yeah,
Not to mention 21
exactly.
or 23.
Yeah, it is. I just, there's so many things. That's why I always like to scholarship them and do other things, because there are many of the tools that we teach in remote viewing that can benefit them to a high degree. But that's not what we're talking about with Upgrade. That's just something we're saying that we do. But with Upgrade, we're looking at, focusing more productive, more proactive, high-end kinds of focuses and, course developments. But there will always be a role for us to be remembering and thinking about these young men and women that we, gave this responsibility to do the bidding of our republic that we benefit from. And so we have to always consider those things. But, look, that's not necessarily our job. It's maybe the people we train, it becomes their job to come up with these ideas.
You inspired a thought in me. What you're saying about the scholarship for veterans. I think that at Upgrade, I think that we're going to do something for the veterans. I think it's time for us to give the veterans a special opportunity to access Upgrade in ways that were never available starting now. I'll discuss with our team, and we'll figure out something
That's why I brought it up. I knew you would come up with something.
I knew it years ago, man. This has been a long plan.
Oh, man. Yeah, we're going to do something very special for veterans. We'll announce it probably in the next episode.
That'd be awesome.
I feel something special that we need to do for them, because when all else fails, we know that our methodology can help. So although we can't legally guarantee, but we did bring on scientists to research our methodologies and prove with case study of how well they can, the things that we do can help someone. And one thing I do want to bring up, as you were saying, people thinking things are their own fault, in a lesser, perhaps less intense, but may feel just as intense manner, for many individuals who witness the divorce of a parent or parents, or experiencing some other trauma in relationships or in family, many young kids, even young adults, will say, that's my fault. Unconsciously or consciously, they'll say, that's my fault. That was me that caused it, right? See, it's important to take responsibility for life. However, taking responsibility in an angle or in a way, in a perspective that actually does not benefit the individual is something that we not only should refrain from, but we should certainly find a reframe of that. And if I may explain quickly, I think that taking, once again, 100% responsibility to learn from everything that's going on is very important. However, saying that, oh, that's my fault and there's nothing I can do about it, that's not healthy. What's healthy, in my opinion, is learning from everything that occurs in life, even when something has nothing to do with you, but without associating and saying that is totally me. It's a paradox, but it gives gives us the opportunity to be like, I can learn from it and get the value out of whatever learning I can get, instead of saying, oh man, and blaming self, feeling guilty, because negative emotion simply is a message delivery mechanism. And if one can extract the message, the emotion disappears. There's no need to hold on to it. So I think that that's one of the primary things I observed as a huge benefit for myself and anyone who has gone through upgrade, to be able to learn from you soon after, and or even learning from you immediately as we help them learn to deal with their emotions and the noise in their background. So I think that as we and David and I have talked extensively about this as we launch these new 6 levels of training coming from David, which, oh man, I keep getting excited when I think about this. And I've been orchestrating and strategizing how we would make this the most powerful courses on advance human potential, or advancing the humanity's progression. And I believe that if we can give people the ability to remove some of those limits, or much of that limit that you and I have been, we've all been talking about, and then give them this tool to be able to explore that capability and allow them, and look, people that are coming to take this course they're interested in gathering information about their own lives,
Mm-hmm.
and things that matter to their personal or career success, right? So we want everyone to know that if you were to pursue this training with us, with David, which will be bringing, this incredible wealth of information to us, to all of humanity, participate with not only an open mind, but know that we're going to help you let go and remove those limitations in a precise, even mathematical manner, so that you can measure the success.
Yeah, that's well put, extraordinarily well put. If you take the class, even if you are skeptical and you have doubts, as long as you accept what you're asked to do and you are willing to play full out, is the best term I can think of. Play full out means you can have your reservations, but when you step into the class, you leave those reservations in your back pocket somewhere, right? You listen, you learn, you appreciate that you are a student in a class of other students, and you appreciate, because I'm going to give you the fire hose treatment anyway about all of that, meaning, I'm going to open up the spigot and start pouring information to you.
It's the most pleasant, most pleasurable fire hose treatment.
Pour it on me, baby.
Yeah, it's not implying beating you with anything. It just means, you're open your mouth up and just start. The data is going to start coming. The instruction will come, but I think it comes in at an extraordinarily well thought out and technologically supported, instructional platform, and we are there to explain difficult concepts to you, and we will give you the physics of this. We will help you understand lay interpretations, or we can go as deep as we need to go, but we will help you understand why you're able to do this and where it comes from in the human mind's ability to detect, waveform data, decode it into 4-dimensional data, and then objectify it on 2-dimensional medium. And it is an interesting process that you'll learn. And we won't just throw something out there and then expect, okay, well, you just sort that out on your own and good luck. We will, make sure you understand it all the way. And as William is saying, and as Brady has said, this is the one process that you will step away from it. And I love that you used the term earlier in the podcast, because I still remember that Mari, who's one of my Argentinian students, a mother of two, and a wonderful wife to her husband David, and she takes the first class. She takes the first class and does the first target, and she just sends me a text and goes, "I just realized I have a superpower." Yeah, you all have superpowers. You all have this ability to be omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. And once you are given the explanation for that, you'll understand why those words came into being in ancient Latin. You'll also understand why they were stolen away from you, but you'll understand what they mean and how it applies to that. And then truly, as I was given this phrase, which meant really nothing to me when I was given this phrase, back in the 80s by Fern Gavin, the program manager of the remote viewing units, goes, "Your life will never be the same again." And I was like, yeah, man, what does that mean? Sure, okay. It won't.
Well, it's kind of like if we all lived our lives as flightless birds. We're like, well, we got these wings. We have these wings, but they don't do anything. And then one day someone came through and said, hey, we all have these wings. We're ostriches, but we have not been using them correctly. We all hear people say we use something like 8 to 10% of our brain capacity. And yet we all have, if that, right? I know people I can say definitely not that much. But I know people that it's definitely more, right? And so what if you were able to add even a 3%, maybe a 6% increase into your overall skill set and tapping into that gray matter? It's not obvious what happens when you allow yourself to become smarter. And that's what I found myself having to confront when I was training with you was, am I willing to put ceilings over my own abilities because I was scared or because I had a narrative about my cognition, my role as a member of the species, maybe my own just intelligence. And so I sat in this room and I watched people that had nearly absolute doubt, but they were still there anyways. And I watched them, not to give it all away, but I watched them sketch out things that were not in the room and they were accurate to what they were trying to target. And to witness that with my own eyes, my girlfriend saw it too, William, you saw it, to watch these people do that for the very first time with a handful of processes, practices, and the protocols that you teach. And this is just like day one. This was like the first time that we started doing it after some processes. They were designing things that were accurate. It was like you with Niagara Falls, Will. Like this is something that I think most people are going to waffle back and forth on and try. A handful of people are going to jump right in the second it's available. And they're going to see just how far they can push their own neurology. And then the rest of them are just going to figure it out eventually. And it'll be like, oh, I was a flightless bird. Why are you flying? Penguins can't fly. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? Yeah.
That's really a good analogy. I mean, it is, it's so hard to believe you're born into this life, and then life, unless you have a parent or someone who is a nurturing person that is a believer or a knower of these things, who just nurtures and builds it, like in Mari Gonzalez's case, right, with her son and her daughter. I mean, she's an avid practitioner and student of how better to educate her children. Her son just the other day, now has been doing this for 3 years with his mom. And he just got to this place, and she sent me a text and said, he's an underage minor, so I don't want to mention his name, but he said, I just found out that I have been lied to all my life. And he's talking about everything that he is at, from peers to teachers, to, science as he was able to grasp it at his age, to clergy, everything. I have been lied to all my life, because he is embracing and discovering through the work that his mom is doing as a trained remote viewer, and then, developing these methodologies for training children, that it is just opening him up to a limitless life of promise and possibilities, and understanding, and more importantly, knowing what he is. There's nobody going to step in and take this kid and put blinders on him again, or, shut down his hearing and shut down his belief in himself, or his knowledge about himself, or the world, the universe around him. He is going to live powerfully. And so what are we talking about in all of this? We're talking about changing generational thought and interpretations of human ability, generational, because we as a species are just going to keep ourselves in the same limited do loop, where we just keep turning tighter and tighter circles of what cannot be done. We can get more techie, but we can just keep killing at an ever increasing, speed of lethality and precision, and tighter and more greed and more this and more that. And it is not going to happen based on mathematics. It's not going to happen until we spin up 3 generations of children who are raised understanding a limitless perspective of a possibility for themselves, and stop listening to people say what they are not, what they can't be, how, oh, that's not science, oh, that's this. People that talk like that come from a perspective of absolutism. And look it up, what absolutism is. It is the most dictatorial, authoritarian perspective on what is and what isn't. And the finest scientists in our world to this day scoff at absolutism being spoken. It's a degree of arrogance that is, it's just wrong. It is the wrong approach to it, to even understanding the very profession under which you're trying to build the foundation of skepticism, and limits and limited thought. And I get it that some people want to say, stop attaching, stop giving meaning to something you can't touch or feel. And what I'm saying to you is, that's the skeptic talking, because you will be able to touch and feel. That's part of knowing that you are limitless, that you are this omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent being in this life.
Isn't it interesting that these words were removed from our texts, in the ancient time, even before the King James Version came out? And what's interesting about that is, whenever there's no language to describe something, right? We don't have labels for something. We almost have no capability of processing it. If we were to go show any of the people in the 1500s, our iPhones or our laptops or our projectors, they'll look at it, probably not even processing at all what it is, and just walk right through it.
They'd burn you
right
at the
past
stake.
it.
What are you talking about?
Or that.
You would call you a witch, because you would have little human beings contained in this thin piece of something, like you capture souls in there.
Yeah, let them out.
Yeah, you would have.
What have you done?
That would have been it for you, William.
So I'd probably I'd probably be sitting in the car they can't get to. Anyway, my thought is, actually I'd buy one of those Rezvanis. Have you guys seen those bulletproof SUVs? They're awesome.
Oh, you take that back in time. Knowing that's on the table, I would too. Rezvani's pretty cool.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, if you're going to go back in time into the Middle Ages and Dark Ages, etc., bring something you can button up. Hold the iPad up to the window.
It feels like that's what we're doing with people now, telling them that their cognition has way less limits than they thought.
Yeah,
It's almost like
Right?
going back in time. Yeah, it
Right?
freaks people out a little bit. They're like, wait, what?
Well, that's because they don't want to be associated with some of the other 72 things that we talked about. And I get it. I mean, I don't either. There are some very, very ridiculous, cons and other things that people talk about. I can start a fire with my mind. No, you can't. I mean, no, you can't. And then people will draw your attention to a YouTube video, and you're like, okay, I get it. You didn't take chemistry. Okay, you don't understand ABC, that there's an A and a B component, right? That there's a B component laying on the ground, on paper, and you have the A component in your hand. You touch the two, and it's spontaneous combustion. Not it is. It's a magic trick. I mean, come on. But there are guys that do this, and they go through all the theatrics of it, and
so many charlatans.
And that's what this is not, and never has been, and never will be. And if there are charlatans or individuals that are taking this term remote viewing and spreading around and using it as their field, their science, if I know who they are, what they are, when I see them, I really do I tell people about it, because like I said at the beginning of this, you have to call a thing by its right name. And if it's just some ridiculousness, then it's not something that I want the art and the science of remote viewing to be associated with, which is why it's never taught like that. And we live by rules, and we make sure people understand those rules, because anytime we live outside those rules, anytime we exaggerate and overstate, and try to claim, greatness for ourselves and high degrees of accuracy, and, oh, we solved this, and, oh, we did that. I can lead you in business with this, so you'll know where to put, your money to win in the stock market. It's like, no, you won't, because if that were possible, it would have already been done, right? If it was going to help you win the lottery, there would have already been somebody winning the lottery with it. There were plenty of military trained remote viewers or CIA trained remote viewers that, if they were that accurate, if they were all that, and I mean, it goes all the way from even some of my former colleagues talking about being trained, being hired by oil companies to, help them prospect for oil.
Yeah. They wouldn't be on a military pension hanging out if they could look at the lottery number and find the next gold rush with. That's so interesting how spatially that implements. What that illustrates to the layman is, like, I guess if the idea is that the mind can go to all of these far-flung places at different parts of time, one could assume that you could just look at a lotto ticket, but you're saying, hey, look, over decades of experience, this is a very tried and true protocol, and it doesn't do that. Which is like, what does it do then? That's fascinating. And so what it does is, well, mostly it's for you in a big way. And mostly it's for you to be able to take on an ownership that you are more magnificent than you realize, that you have an innate gift as a member of the species, and you have a divine right to be able to just tap into who you are and go and do amazing things in this world. Most people write themselves off. Oh, I started here. Oh, I can only do this. Oh, I work at this job. I couldn't be divine. Yes, you are. And that was the biggest takeaway for me. And if there's anything else other than jump into the course right when it deploys online, if there's anything else that you take away from today's podcast, it is that you're more magnificent than you realize. And the limits can be removed, and it starts with you.
Yeah, we'll put a place on upgrade.com, upgrd.com, for you guys to go and subscribe, essentially, so that when we are ready to launch, you'll get an email for this course. Now, one thing I do want to point out real quick is what's really interesting, as you guys are saying this, with the lottery ticket, and no one's been able to predict that, right? If I may ask a couple of questions, I think this is quite curious to me. I think that what if, because you mentioned earlier SRI, right? Stanford Research Institute. So this isn't coming from some random person living under the bridge. This is coming from world-renowned scientists using specific protocols that are not only scientific, but these are advanced scientific protocols. Now, I want to ask this: what if people who are in the lotto industry, they know that people have these abilities, because that's a lot of money at stake? What if there are ways that they've devised to prevent remote viewing?
Well,
I'm curious
yeah,
if you have something about that.
I don't think it would be a concern of theirs, because I mean, you're talking about, I don't remember precisely what the chances that first of all, I don't even know how the lotto works.
High.
Yeah. The mathematical percentage, it's like what, 1 in 8 billion or one in 800 million or something like that, right? To be able to do that. And I don't know in a lot of what is like, you have to pick 10 numbers, or you have to pick 8 numbers or 6 numbers or whatever it is. And you not only have to pick those numbers, but you have to pick them in the proper sequence. So then it starts to go into, this whole idea of remote viewing future, which people get all wrapped up around. And it's
infinite possibilities of future.
There are infinite possibilities. And not only their infinite potentials, right, or possibilities or potentials, but as the moment moves through time, never stopping and never reaching the end of the journey, the moment is moving through all of these potentials, right? And maybe with all of your work and a team and everything else, you might cause a resonant frequency sufficient to cause certain potentials to stack up. Each potential is different. And, as you move through that, it's a diminishing, cone of probabilities, which just means that the closer the moment gets to certain potentials, the higher the probability that that potential will become, the reality for that one moment. And then it becomes another potential as it moves off into what we would call, from a linear construct, the past. But there's still change distribution that can shift those potentials around, meaning that there's a collective moment and frequency that happens that causes potentials to shift and move around, even when you're just certain that this is what's going to happen, in the next moment it's going to happen, and it doesn't. And that's a really bizarre way of explaining it, but that's what happens. Wow. You would have as much chance as any other person who stands up and goes, well, I'm going to play my kid's birthday, because that's how random it potentially is, assuming, that we're not involved in like the McDonald's thing and the other stuff where they were ripping everybody off, and, people were printing, the wrong kinds of the Monopoly game pieces. I mean, there's not corruption in the game, or it's not being some other thing like being manipulated by Pepsi, like, about the jet and stuff. I mean, there's so much that goes on.
So you're saying using media, combining media tools, one can influence because you can reach a mass amount of people, therefore influencing the potentiality of something happening.
There's a reason why the payouts on those things are so high. The payouts on those things are so high because, so many people lose. It's just like, thinking you got remote viewers saying to people things like, oh, I'm going to go to Vegas and we're going to win because I'm going to psychically count cards. Get that. Well, first of all, remote viewers don't psychically count anything. But to think that you're going to go and psychically count cards, you're going to be run out of there on a rail just like any other card counter will be if you even look like you're trying to count cards. And if you start putting your hands up to your temples and rubbing them, then you're really going to start a fire. You're going to start a fire. You're going to be tossed, and they won't even.
Better off being a mentalist in those spaces.
Jeez, it's like, which is where all of the magicians, ended up, like Amazing Randy, God rest his soul, and and all of the rest of the guys that are in psychops right now. The guys are these founding fathers of this skeptical organization, the vast majority of them are magicians, and they are really, just adamant, vicious attackers of people that stand up and proclaim psychic abilities and visions and other kinds of things. If you're a credible remote viewer, they stay the hell away from you. And they stay away from you because they know you're not going to make some ridiculous claim of an ability towards something that they can easily disprove. But anytime you start standing outside those rules and start talking about capabilities and abilities and exaggerating things, your own accuracy, which I get, people do it because they think it draws a crowd and it's going to get them money. That's what they think. But what it gets you is misery. And to be honest with you, I try to make it very clear to students that I don't really care if you burn yourself down. If you do what I'm telling you not to do, you will burn yourself down. You may get away with it for a while, but they will soon find you. And they will make a point of publicly destroying you. And why? Because you will have given them every ounce of ammunition and explosive that they need to blow you in place. And that's what they
Meaning
do.
if they're lying about their capabilities.
Well, if you're standing up and claiming, I work with all these police departments and I'm always highly accurate and I've done this and I've done that and I've done that and done this. And, then there are all around the world, there are these skeptical groups that actually, pool money to say like, oh, we'll give you $10 million, if you can prove psychic ability. But we establish the test and we're the judges. Well, you'd have to be one stupid person to step up and go, oh, no, I know I can win that. This is like saying that you feel that your obligation is to convince 2% of the population to see things your way. Why don't you just take a big run off the edge of the Grand Canyon or something? You'll probably have more fun, on the way down. It's just like
bring a parachute.
Yeah, I tell people don't do that. It's 2% of the population that takes that kind of perspective, and you're not going to convince them to see it your way. So why would you subject yourself to that? And what happens is people that engage in stuff like that, they keep pushing the envelope of what they're willing to say, right? They feel like they got to you got to stretch it a little bit more, And they don't get it that these guys are in the business of illusions, right? They are in the business of smoke and mirrors and illusions. So you start smoke and mirrors, they can pick it instantly. And the problem with them being in that 2% is because their world is nothing but illusion. And the fact that they have mastered an ability like a mentalist to manipulate people and pick up on things that allows them to use the illusion and the process, the trick, if you will, to do that. They see the whole world as that. You have to understand that about them. It's not necessarily a character flaw. What it simply is their training and their conditioning has been that when they see somebody do something that is an extraordinary capability, they immediately process it as, I can replicate that as an illusion, as a trick. But that's not what negates the human potential. What negates the human potential is the fact that you think that everything that you can replicate as a scam or a trick or an illusion defines what that person just did or explains what that person just did. And people don't connect the dots on that, which is why you shouldn't have anything to do with these guys and you should just stay out of their way. And you have to recognize the animal you're working with. These are guys that the vast majority of them, Ray Hyman, right on up. These guys are all guys that started off as magicians and mentalists who then, somewhere along the line got the idea, I'm going to go to college and become a psychologist, or I'm going to go to college and become this or that. And So then they turn around and say, oh, you're going to stand here and claim that you can levitate. Well, let me show you that you can't. And sure enough, that's exactly what they do. And then they burn these people down. Now, I, you know, here's one thing. It's like, and you'll probably want to edit this out. So, you know, Penn and Teller stand up every show. They do 2 shows a day, 6 or 7 days a week. I don't know how many it is. They stand up at the beginning of every show and they mention remote viewing by name and they call it bullshit to their entire audience. And they describe it as being nothing but crap. You want to know why they do that? In the very first season of Bullshit, remember their television show that they have? They had a television show called Bullshit.
Tell all.
Where they went in, tell all, where they went in and butchered anybody that was claiming to do this or do that. And they would go in and go, here it is, and bullshit. You know, that was their big tagline. Well, they did a show, season 1, like episode 4, I think. And there's a remote viewer on there. And as this guy, his name is Wayne Carr, and as he's standing there being completely shredded by the producers and the guys that are working for Bullshit, over his left shoulder, hanging up on the wall right behind him, is a remote viewing technologies diploma. That was my diploma for him. And as I tell every student, don't let your ass override your brain. And, you know, don't get out there and start violent. Don't start reinventing everything. And that's exactly what this guy did. This guy completely bastardized everything he was taught. Why? Because he thought that he could take a 5-day class and then he could turn around and he could completely modify everything. He could say whatever he wanted to say about it, and nobody was going to think a thing. And he was going to make money in the meantime, selling it, you know, to students. And that's what this guy was about. Take a 5-day class, go hang out a shingle. I'm a trainer. I'm a remote viewing trainer. Here's my diploma. Well, they just burned him down to, I mean, he was nothing but a small smoking pile of ash by the time he was done. But like I said, I don't care that Wayne Carr did that to himself. What I care about is that remote viewing is now, because of him, the opening comment that they make to every audience that they have in Las Vegas. Every show.
Wow. That sounds like the beginning of NLP, as well as a lot of coaching methodologies.
Yeah.
People just got a diploma. They're like, I can just change everything. And look, people can change, right? I mean, people can change things, but if they really know and master what they do.
That takes
mastery.
That takes a long time to understand, you know, to understand everything about remote viewing and be able to teach it effectively. And this guy just, you know, 5 days now he just goes out and, you know, I've been to Penn and Teller twice when I was in Vegas, and every time they stand up and say it about remote viewing, and all the friends that were there with us were going, huh? You know, looking over at me like, you know, I'm like,
yeah, but it's almost like, it's like if someone stood up and is like, just so you all know, I am not cheating on my wife. It's kind of weird. It's like, well, no one thought that in the first place. Why are you saying that? And so it almost is like it shines an unnecessary spotlight on something like, why did you bring that up for effectively no reason? What is remote viewing? That's what that does to me. You know, for our listeners, if this sounds like you're sitting at a coffee shop and across the table from you is the deputy director of some private secret operation and then his number one candidate, and they're talking about the most fantastical things you've ever heard, and you're sitting there with your latte like, what are they saying right now? If that's what this conversation has felt like to you, a little insider baseball, because boy, if this is a departure from what most people talk about, I would venture to guess that it feels that way for nearly everyone. And it's exciting because this is all real stuff. And so to accept that this is real, and that the efforts made to maybe discredit it or to obfuscate it are typically out of fear or out of some ulterior motive or a profit motivated agenda, whatever that may be. The basis continues to hold its ground. It continues to hold water. It continues to make sense. And for true practitioners that are willing to accept that they may be smarter than they've given themselves credit for, try the protocols, try and push your mind. It may not happen over the first day, the first week or month. Some people have much more natural proclivities towards these things, as I am assuming. And some people have been spending their years opening their minds. If someone spends years trying to open their mind versus someone that doesn't, and then they both try the same complex task of pushing the boundaries of the mind, I think one person would have a better go of it than another because of the preparation that went into it. You know, this whole thing is fascinating. I think we could go on. I cannot wait for the world.
We got to do another episode. This is way too good.
Yes.
It's way too good.
I agree.
And, you know, I think that I used to participate in the Clubhouse conversations, and David's conversation is not only fascinating, and literally every line or every other line, there's some amazing magic bullet, some sort of wisdom that you can take away, and you're like, wow, I feel like I just downloaded some incredible research data. And when you begin to combine them and you follow, especially if you have been so lucky to have been trained by David, and or, you know, when you get a chance to participate with when he brings all of the content to the Upgrade platform, you'll find that these wisdoms, they all have reasons and they all have a history and they all work together. And if you have the structure of remote viewing, the true structure, not some randomly made up structure by someone who may have watched an online video somewhere and maybe even printed their own certificate. And look, it happens a lot. Like I remember in the beginning of NLP, there are people that are like, oh yeah, I read a book, therefore I'm a practitioner. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I sacrificed like my entire credit account and on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars with, you know, my bank, and sold my bed, my alarm clock, even my trusted bicycle, which I was, you know, I still miss, and a bunch of other stuff. And I sold my car. I sold everything to go and learn. And then someone's like, oh yeah, I read a book, I'm going to charge the same amount. I'm like, I will watch you fail. And it's okay, right? And the beauty is failure is just feedback. And what I'm interested in is giving the listeners and the audience a chance to skip as much of the harsh feedback of learning this most incredible technology that allows you to tap into your true potential in your mind through learning with David Morehouse. There's no greater authority in this world that can teach this right now on Earth. And he's the man to teach this. So I'm super, I don't even think lucky or honored or privileged describes even a degree of how I feel about this. And Brady and I and our team have been hard at work to creating the perfect structure to deliver this beautiful training to all of you, to humanity. So please stay tuned and subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media, because that's where we're going to announce it first on our Instagram channel, The Upgrade, THEUPGRD, and William.upgrade, William.upgrd. And David and Brady's account will be tagged so that you guys can follow him as well, follow them. And super appreciate you guys listening and looking forward to seeing you and talking with you next time.